If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Jay Conner. Jay, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Kevin, thank you so much for inviting me along to talk about $1 million relationships. For goodness sakes, I'm so excited about that because after all, what asset do we have more valuable than our relationships?
Amen. Amen. And, I want to start off by, it's really interesting because normally when I have podcast guests, that most of them have been personally introduced by somebody else that already knew me or somebody that was a guest on the podcast or something like that. And this situation is a little bit different in that you've got somebody on your team, Bev, who ended up reaching out to me. She sent an email. And she was like, Kevin, I see you host the $1 Million Relationships Podcast, and I think Jay Conner would be a great guest for your podcast. Here's some info on him. And she sent a couple links, and I started checking you out, and I'm like, man, I like this guy. And so I got back to Bev. You and I made time to connect. We hopped on a Zoom call, got to know each other, and I was like, yep. Bev was right. Jay, I would love to do a podcast interview with you. And so here we are. And Bev, if you happen to listen to this, thank you so much for sending me that email. I really appreciate it, man. So Jay, I just want to start. I want to start by turning it over to you. I want you to be able to, I want to set a little bit of context here for our listeners and kind of really give them a good idea about who you are and what you're all about. And so, give us some story, let us know what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you get to do. And also, I want to hear some of the backstory of how you got into this, because every entrepreneur has an amazing story. And Jay, you are no exception. I know that for a fact already.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I really enjoyed getting to know you when we talked last. That was prior to us getting here on the show. And of course, one thing that you and I determined and figured out really, really quick is you and I have got the same core values. And you and I just ended up with a lot of things in common that I remember identifying. So, one of my favorite questions that I ask people when they come on my podcast and my show is I'll say, you can answer this as quick as you like, or you can make it as long as you like. And then I'll say, if you were a guest on my podcast, I'd say, Kevin, tell me and my audience, who is Kevin Thompson? And so I'm going to pretend you just asked me, who is Jay Conner?
I love that.
I'll try not to make it too long. So Jay Conner, I'm a person that, first of all, my top core value is my spiritual relationship with God and Jesus Christ, and I'm not ashamed at all to say that.
Amen.
And Kevin, you go to speaker school. I mean, I've got my own podcast, had over 800 shows. I've been a guest on over 800 other podcasts, and people, you go to, and I speak on the platform, and trainers will say, "Don't talk politics, don't talk religion." Well, you know what? I believe that when you're talking with someone and you're establishing a new relationship, such as I am here with you and your audience, which I appreciate so much, I believe authenticity is the key.
Yeah.
Be who you are. Yeah. Be who you are. I don't know who in the world, Kevin, came up with the phrase or the mantra, opposites attract. That's the most stupid thing I ever heard in my life. I want to be around people that are like me, Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when my dad, Wallace Conner, what an inspiration to me, my dad, Wallace Conner, he's 91 and a half years old right now, and he's always sure to make sure the half. Don't leave out the 91 and a half years old. But he is right in the middle of a brand new subdivision that he's building out, 375 houses. and he's in the middle of building that out. And when I grow up, I want to be like Wallace Connor, my dad. But the reason he comes to mind is when I was growing up, Kevin, my dad said to me something that I did not understand. I understand it very well now.
Okay.
But he'd say, Jay, don't try to be me. Don't try to be your dad. You be you. You be your own person. You be your own man. You blaze your own trail. And it didn't make sense when he was telling me that. But it did make sense is when I got into my 20s and I would try to mimic and act like other people. And you know what? It didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, there's only one Kevin Thompson like you on the planet. There's only one Jay Connor like I am on the planet. And for those of all of you that are tuning into this show, when you were created, there's really only one of you. Be authentically you. So who is Jay Connor authentically? Spiritual foundation is very, very important. As a result of that, I met my wife, Carol Joy, in Wichita Falls, Texas. I'm from North Carolina. I'm here in Eastern North Carolina with Carol now, my wife. But I moved out to Wichita Falls, Texas way back when I was 24 years old. And my very first Sunday in town, I met Carol Joy at church. We've been dating ever since. We've been dating 41 years. We've been married 39 years of those 41 years. And so what else are we all about? We love to write music. So we write and compose music, church hymns, etc. I love to write piano music. Some of my piano music is actually in Universal Studio movies, so that's pretty cool. But then there's this thing called real estate investing. So I started, Carol Joy, my wife, and I, we started investing in single family houses here in Eastern North Carolina all the way back in 2003. Okay. 2003. Been full-time in it ever since. We're in a small market, only 50,000 people, and we do about 3 deals a month, about 30 deals or so actually a year. We flip most of them. Our average profits now are $86,000 per transaction. I do not share that from ego. I don't share that to brag. I share that to make a point, and that is there's an argument to be made to be a big fish in a small pond. So only 50,000 people. Be consistent with your marketing. You can pretty much predominate a small market if you are, and don't go where all the other competitors and other real estate investors are, like the big cities. But nonetheless, we started investing in 2003. Now, from 2003, Kevin, until January of 2009, all I knew to do to get my houses and my deals funded is go to the local bank, get on my hands and knees, put my hands underneath my chin and say, please fund my deal. And the banker, of course, would make me pull up my skirt and show my personal assets and get my credit score pulled and financial statements. That's all I knew to do. I mean, the local bank, institutional money, they made the rules. They set the interest rate. They were the underwriter. That's all I knew. That worked okay, Kevin, the first 6 years until January 2009. Ooh, boys. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting right here at my desk. Believe it or not, we still actually have handsets and cords.
Oh, I got one of those too.
Telephones, the Z Gen doesn't know what that is. Anyway, so I picked up my telephone and I called my banker. His name was Steve. I had 2 houses under contract to purchase, and I had been using the bank where Steve worked for 6 years. We had done a ton of deals together, and I called him up about these 2 deals that I had under contract, and I told him the funding that was required for the deals. And I learned like that over the telephone that my line of credit had been shut down with no notice whatsoever to me after having a great relationship for 6 years. I said, Steve, what in the world are you doing and telling me you've shut down my line of credit? Why? He said, Jay, don't you know there's a global financial crisis going on right now? I said, no, but you just gave me a global financial crisis. Mm-hmm. I don't have a way to fund my 2 deals with you shutting me down with no notice. And I had an 800 credit score, never been late on my payments with the bank for 6 years. He says, well, Jay, we're just not loaning money out to real estate investors. So I hung up the phone, Kevin. And, all of us in our entrepreneurial journey, have these pivotal moments. If you've been around any length of time, you have these pivotal moments that something happens that looks painful. It feels painful. It's a challenge. You don't know how you're going to get out of it. So I sat right here at my desk after having that conversation with Steve. And Kevin, I want to share this question that I asked myself with you and your audience. It's a very powerful question. The question will help fix any problem that anybody's got going on. I don't care if it's health, relationships, financial, career, doesn't matter. Very powerful question. By the way, these people running around saying, oh, every problem's an opportunity. I want to throw up. I didn't have an opportunity. I had a problem. Let's face the facts here, right? But here's the question I asked myself. And the question I asked myself was, Jay, who do you know?
Yeah.
There it is. There it is. Who do you know that can help fix your problem? It's amazing. Immediately after I asked myself that question, I thought of Jeff Blankenship, dear friend of mine and Carol Joy's. We knew each other from Christian gospel singing events that we would go to. He was living in Greensboro, North Carolina at the time. This was 2009. So I called up Jeff, and I told him what had just happened with me and my banker and my conversation with the banker and getting shut down. I said, Jeff, I just got cut off from the bank. He says, welcome to the club. I said, well, what club is that? He said, the club of being shut down from the bank. He said, my bank shut me down last week.
Wow.
My next thought, Kevin, was, well, I'm talking to the wrong dude here.
Uh-huh.
I said, well, Jeff, how are you going to fund your deals? He said, well, Jay, have you ever heard of private money? I said, no. What's that? He says, well, I'm not sure. He says, have you ever heard of self-directed IRAs and how people can use their retirement funds to be a passive real estate investor and loan money out to us real estate investors, and the interest they earn from us is either tax deferred or tax free? You ever heard of that? I said, Jeff, I don't have a clue in the world what you're talking about. I said, where do we find out about this? He said, well, there's this gentleman down in Jacksonville, Florida, by the name of Ron LeGrand. Ron LeGrand in Jacksonville, Florida. And he can teach us how to get private money for our real estate deals. I said, well, what's private money? He said, Jay, I don't know, but Ron says we can get a lot of it. So it was because of me. So let's unpack this for a second.
Yeah.
6 years of funding, no problem. I'm cut off from the bank. I asked myself the question, who can help me with my problem? I call up Jeff. Jeff tells me about Ron LeGrand. Jeff and I go to Ron LeGrand's Quick Start Real Estate Investing School the very next month in February of 2009. I learn about private money. I'd never heard of, and I'm not talking hard money. This is not hard money from a hard money lender or broker. This is learning how to raise your own capital yourself through your own connections, your network, growing your network, etc. So I learned about that from Ron LeGrand in less than 90 days. Thanks to Ron LeGrand, I was able to raise $2,150,000 for my single family real estate deals. That was more than I had at the bank. All I had at the bank at the time was $1 million line of credit, which ran out pretty quickly. I had to pass up on deals all the time because all I had was $1 million line. So now, thanks to the bank cutting me off and the global financial crisis, I got a raise.
Yeah.
So, it was a huge blessing in disguise of being cut off from the bank. I had to find a better and quicker way to fund my deals. And it's because of that experience, Kevin, I learned a very powerful, my lands, I'm so glad we're talking about this. I learned a very powerful formula from Jack Canfield. Now, Jack Canfield was the co-author with Mark Victor Hansen of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. millions and millions and millions of books sold. Well, Jack Canfield, a few years ago, in fact, about 10 years ago, he wrote a book called The Success Principles. Powerful book. It's got 65 success principles in the book. And the very first principle in the book, the success principles, is as follows. Take 100% responsibility for everything that happens in your life. And the formula that he teaches in that first chapter is a formula that is E plus R equals O. And the E stands for the event that happened in your life. The R stands for your response to that event that happened in your life. And that equals the outcome that you are now experiencing. Unfortunately, most people walking around live by a different formula. This is called the victim formula. And the victim formula is E equals O. Most people walking around, unfortunately, have an event happen in their life, and in their mind, that event is now determining their outcome. But what is so liberating, Kevin, and I'm going to bring this full circle. This is going to make sense in about 20 seconds. What's so liberating about this formula is that when we realize that we are 100% responsible and we've got a 100% choice as to we can respond to any event in our life any way we want to, whether we brought that on or we didn't bring that on, we can respond to that in any way, and it's our response to the event that determines the outcome. How does that tie in with anything? It ties into the story I just told. Bank cuts me off. I didn't have anything to do with the global financial crisis. So when the bank cut me off, I could have been a victim, or I could know I've got a response. I could go, put my tail between my legs and go crawl in the corner and eat Cheetos and cry. Or I could say, how could I respond to this event? Oh, I can ask, who do I know that can help me with my problem? And then that leads to Jeff, that leads to Ron, and Ron LeGrand has had more of an impact in my real estate investing career than anybody else on the planet. I could never pay Ron LeGrand back for what he's taught me.
Wow. And what a small world, because I started a carpet cleaning business in 1995. And through that, I got this mentor, this guy, Joe Polish.
Joe Polish, of course.
Yeah, I met Joe because of that business, and he helped me completely turn that business around and into a profitable business instead of one that was just sucking the life and the income out of it. Because I didn't know what I didn't know. And but through Joe, I met Dan Kennedy. And I went to a Dan Kennedy seminar in 1999. Was the first Dan Kennedy seminar I ever went to. And I met Ron LeGrand at that seminar. Ron was an attendee like me at that seminar and stuff of Dan's.
Wow. And by the way, I own every published book that Dan Kennedy wrote.
Yeah, I got all his books too and stuff.
I got them all. Now,
the Ultimate Sales Letter was the very first one I ever read. And
yeah, Dan Kennedy's amazing. He's got an amazing story too. He was on his deathbed. He actually wrote. Yeah. He wrote his deathbed letter.
Yes. In
hospice, and the man is still going.
Yes, he is. He's still going. You bet. Yep. So, wow, what a phenomenal story that is, and because your friend, had found out about Ron, who then is the two of you go to Ron's event and find out how to get access to private money. And so keep your own deals on track. And of course now, so that was all the way back in 2009. So that was 14 years ago. Yes. And now as a result of that, you have helped a whole lot of other people by showing them how to get access to private money to fund their deals and stuff.
Absolutely. So it's like I've been paying it forward, but there's another story that ties in there with Ron LeGrand.
Okay.
So 2009, I met him, learned about private money, and I learned all those other creative methods too. I'd never heard about buying a house subject to the existing note. Who in the world is going to agree to leave the mortgage in their name, and I'm going to agree to make their payments, for goodness sake? I learned all about that, creative financing, selling on purchase, all that stuff I never heard about. Thanks to Ron LeGrand. So 2 years later, Kevin, in February, I'll get it right in a minute, January 2011.
Okay.
January 2011, 2 years after I'd met Ron LeGrand, I find myself totally bored making a lot of money. Now, making a lot of money, that's pretty nice, but bored is no fun, particularly when you've got an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we got to be producing. We got to be creating something, you know, to have fulfillment and have impact, you know.
Yeah.
And so, and the reason that was the case is that I had really worked very hard to automate my business. Now, what do I mean by that? For my business, by and large, to run without me, to where I got the team in place, I got the software in place, I've got the acquisitionist, I've got the real estate attorney, I've got the realtor, I got the general contractors, all that, to where all I'm having to do is make decisions. What houses do I want to make an offer on, and how much do I want to offer? And that's pretty much it. I wasn't even going to houses anymore. They're being done. It's a greased machine, and I am bored to tears. So January 2011, I call up Ron LeGrand. And I said, Ron, the real estate investing business is going fantastic. I'm doing all these deals. I got a fantastic team, and I am bored silly to death. And then I asked another question. I said, Ron, what is next? That was my question. What's next? And Ron says, well, what are you really good at? I said, well, I'm pretty good at raising private money. I've raised millions. And so I'm pretty good at raising private money without ever asking for money. He says, well, why don't you just start teaching people what you do? I said, well, I'm a pretty good teacher. I'm a pretty good communicator, but I don't even know how to start. I mean, you've got this great big company, this education coaching company that coaches all these people on how to be a real estate investor. I don't even know how to begin doing that from a business plan. Mm-hmm. He said, well, why don't you just fly down here to Jacksonville, Florida, and we'll spend a day together, and you can hire me to consult you, and I'll get you started on your information marketing business and your coaching business. I said, sounds good to me. So I flew down to Ron's office there in Jacksonville, Florida. We spent a day together, and he scared the pants right off of me. Before I left that day, we already had my first seminar workshop scheduled in Atlanta, Georgia. And through his connections and his promoters, they were going to fill the room. And I had to show up and I had to teach a full day of how to raise private money for real estate deals. I said, Ron, I don't have anything. I don't have an outline. I know what I do, but I don't have anything. He said, you got 60 days. Get it together and get it done. You're on the calendar. Scared me to death.
Yep.
Scared me to death. So so I leave Jacksonville, Florida the end of that day. Carol Joy was with me, thank goodness, because I was shaking when I left. And I came back home. I can actually remember sitting in the floor of my office. I had papers everywhere. I had notes everywhere. And so I went to putting together my very first seminar on how to raise private money. And so I put on my first seminar March 2011, 60 days later. And then in June of 2011, I did my first webinar on private money to Ron LeGrand's audience.
Wow. Okay.
And I was scared to death on that. I'd never done a webinar. I hardly even knew what a webinar was. So I did that. And so thanks to Ron LeGrand, my coaching, my education, my impact, my significance in the world of real estate investing was all launched because of Ron LeGrand teaching me about private money, and then him showing me how to launch a coaching business. And thanks to him, I've been blessed to have an impact on thousands and thousands and thousands of real estate investors across the nation because of him.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What a story, Jay. What a story. And, not only have you impacted those thousands and thousands of investors, but there's a whole lot of other lives, because the spouses of those investors, the families of those investors, man, there is so many lives that have been impacted because you chose to do that. And coming from those humble beginnings and being really scared, but you know what? You're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because I'm not just going to sit around and be bored forever, So,
I promise you, while I was in the midst, being bored ain't so bad.
Yeah.
But, a good friend of mine, I don't know if you know the name Dave Fulk, Fulk.
I've heard that. I've met Dave, actually.
He would be wonderful. I mean, talk about relationship collateral. Oh, my word. Dave knows how to build and serve. But I was reading one of his Facebook posts. We're in a mastermind together, and in the mastermind Facebook group, he posted yesterday. Oh, for the first time yesterday, he got published in Forbes magazine.
Oh, wow.
His article. And anyway, I can't remember exactly the context of how he said it. But anyway, he said that he is all about impact and not applause.
I love that. I love
impact,
that.
Not applause.
Yeah.
And I said, man, in fact, I wrote it down on my yellow pad in my phone. It resonated with me so much. But yeah, Dave Fulk, reading after him yesterday, he knows all about the relationships and stuff. But anyway, he came to mind because we're talking about, Zig Ziglar. Now I'm dating myself, Zig Ziglar. And I'll really date myself. When I was 24 years old, the sales company I was working for, I was required to listen to every cassette tape that Zig Ziglar had out, and I had to answer homework questions and stuff. But Zig Ziglar, one of the last recordings or courses or what have you that he recorded, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was all about significance, making an impact. Because, after a while, you're an entrepreneur, you're successful, you have the choice. Do you want to eat Cheetos on your sofa, or do you actually want to go out and make a difference? And, we've just been blessed to be able to go out, serve, make a difference. And like Zig says, you help enough other people get what they want and need. You don't have to worry about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting. You and I both have ties to Ron LeGrand because years ago, it was 2003 is when it was, because Joe Polish, because I had back in 2000, because I met Perry Marshall and they were doing some stuff online. I met Perry at that Dan Kennedy seminar, and I also met Yannick Silver, and those two guys were doing some really cool stuff online at the time. And it got me thinking, like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could do something online too and have a nationwide or maybe even a worldwide reach? Wouldn't that be so cool? Because at the time I owned a local cleaning and restoration company. And I ended up starting this, probably one of the ugliest websites on the internet, called getmoldsolutions.com. And it was an extension of my cleaning and restoration business. And over the next 3 years, we built that website up where it was producing about $15,000 a month for the business. And Joe Polish in 2003, in early that year, invited me. He said, Kevin, why don't you come down to the big annual event this year and show everybody what you're doing with your website? And I was like, okay. And he's like, and when you do, he said, before you come, I want you to document everything that you do and how you do it and put it into a course, because a certain percentage of the people, once they hear from you, they're going to want your help. Just make sure you're ready to give that to them. Well,
sounds like he did to you what Ron LeGrand did to me.
Yes. and I had never done anything like that before. Never spoke in public. And I'm like, Joe, I don't even know what to do. Well, I found out that there was, I ended up at another Dan Kennedy seminar, and Ron LeGrand was there, and he was offering this thing called the Promoters and Speakers Boot Camp.
I've got it over there on recorded right there on my bookshelf.
So I invested in, I don't remember what it was. I think it was like 2,500, 2,700, something like that. And it was on VHS.
Yeah.
Tapes is what it was on.
Yeah.
And
I even think wasn't Than Merrill on it?
Yep, Than was on there, and Dan Kennedy was on there, and I never ever watched the promoter's side of that. So half of it I didn't ever even use. I just used the speaker's part because that's what I needed help with.
Right.
And I crafted that presentation using those VHS. I sat in my living room just watching those and taking notes and creating my own presentation. And that presentation went on to, I sold $16.1 million worth of that training.
Wow,
that I had
that's
created.
Amazing, Kevin.
And so all because Ron and Dan and Than and those guys taught me how to create an effective presentation and stuff.
Yes. Yes.
And that was, running that publishing company for 12 years was that was just a really rewarding time. And of course it set the stage and set the foundation for all the work that I get to do today and stuff.
Sure. Well, I had no idea you and I had these people in common.
I didn't either. So I'm so glad you shared, because there's some really cool commonalities, for sure.
Yes.
And
yes. Well, that's so cool. Well, hey, when this show airs, I for sure got to send a link of it to Ron LeGrand.
For sure. Yeah. We gotta let him know how much he's loved and appreciated,
Now, I tell you what, Ron LeGrand, he'd be a fantastic guest on your show.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on. I have not, my goodness, I haven't seen Ron in years,
Yes.
And so, and you're right. He would be a great person to have on.
I tell you what, Ron right now is 78 years old.
Yeah.
He's still teaching at every quick start real estate investing school. And for goodness sakes, he runs circles around me.
Well, Jay, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation and just share from your heart today. I mean, I absolutely love who you are and how you show up. And for anybody that's listening to this going, yeah, Kev, I'm with you, man. I love how Jay shows up too, and maybe there's even some people thinking like, man, maybe I should find out more about what Jay does. Maybe he can help me. So any resources, any websites, any resources we can share with folks, Jay?
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, as a thank you to you and your audience for listening to our conversation, I would love to offer my book for free. It's called Where to Get the Money Now. It's a national bestseller, Where to Get the Money Now. And the subtitle is How and Where to Get Money for Your Real Estate Deals Without Relying on Institutional Money or Hard Money Lenders. I'll be glad to autograph the book. I'll send it out 3-day express delivery. And it's $20 on Amazon, but don't spend $20 on Amazon. Let me send it to you. The book's free. Just covers shipping, which is only $6.
Okay.
And we'll rush it out to you. I will also include with the book 2 tickets to my $3,000 event. So I'll include the 2 tickets.
Awesome.
It's called to the Private Money Conference.
Okay.
Live event that I do 3 times a year. So I'll include tickets with the book for that. And if you're a real estate investor or you want to get into real estate investing and you don't want to use your own money, and you don't want to use the local bank's money, this book will show you step by step, very, very easy to read, exactly how I get all the money from my real estate deals without asking for it. You can pick up the book at jayconner.com/book.
Okay.
So I'm an ER, not an OR, Connor, ER, not OR. So jayconner.com/book. And in addition to that, I'm now in my 8th year of my podcast. The name of the podcast is Raising Private Money. That's simple.
Nice.
Raising Private Money. Just go to your platform, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, and just type in Raising Private Money, and it'll pop up right there. And I'm always interviewing. I have 2 shows a week. We release them early Monday mornings and early Thursday mornings.
Okay.
I'm always interviewing other people that have raised private money in the hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for their real estate deals, and I interview them as to how they go about doing it.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, once again, Jay, thank you so much for coming on today and just sharing from your heart. Any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Yes. Ask yourself, when's the last time you did something new for the first time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also share with you, there's 5 questions I ask myself each morning when I'm journaling. It only takes about 15 minutes or less. But I'll just share one of those questions that I ask myself that I would encourage you to ask yourself as you go throughout your daily life. And that is, what is stirring in my heart to start?
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that.
What is stirring in your heart to start?
Yeah.
After all, life's too short not to start what is stirring in your heart.
Amen. Amen. Well, Jay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you so much for just sharing. Thank you. Thank you for the generous offer. And I'm really excited to get this out there and share it with a lot of other folks. So thank you again. Really appreciate you, Jay.
Kevin, thank you so much. The joy is all mine.
Absolutely.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jayconner.com/moneyguide. That's jayconner.com/moneyguide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jayconner.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.